Good evening and most welcome to H693, and I would talk today about an article written by Stephen M. Rosen, and it's actually posted on focusing.org, Eugene Gendlin's site. I had no idea they had a connection, but apparently they do. How, I don't know. The article's name is exactly as I wrote, but my colleague suggested I put a W in parentheses, and I think that could actually serve the purpose. And wholeness as the body of paradox. And this has to do with that the paradox is not in our thinking, in our system, or in our logic, as Rosen means. Rosen means that the paradox is in reality in itself. And when we get paradoxes in our thinking, that is more or less reflecting the nature of reality. The aim of the article is try to overbridge the old age human endeavor to bridge the gap between these. This is just an one in the many, reference and referent. It's not spelled that way. Intention, what you mean with something, the thing you meant it through, the word. Mind, body. Representation versus reality, something that is very obvious division. And as I mentioned in the previous lecture, 692, it could actually be that all properties from what you find in these divisions and even in objects, they are always coming from the whole, and also, as I mentioned, their individuality. That is also a property that cannot be sectioned off from height, length, weight, mass, density, or whatever you want to give it. It is actually a part of reality. To be individual, to be discrete, that's a property as well. And this is, of course, something that is very seldom mentioned in, for instance, set theory. Bertrand Russell would never have thought of it. He didn't think it was a property to be separate. To be a number, however, that was for him a property. But that's a whole other animal. And here we have from the Odysseus. He tarries at the threshold, he delays, he sets out with trepidation, clinging to her memory, leaves but does not. Odysseus does not know that his moment of departure will bring him home to her. From time immemorial, we human beings have sought to overcome the fragmentation in our lives and attain wholeness. What has been blocking the way? The I, for instance. What I mean is the feeling of fullness, integrity, organic unity has eluded us. Not primarily because of any external obstacle separating us from it, but because whatever the explicit goal we have sought to attain, on an implicit level, the I preemptively has asserted itself. Pre-consciously, before I can even begin to reflect on the contents of my thoughts, this sense of an I establishes itself and propels itself to the fore. this deeply ingrained sense of myself as an ego, an individual being whose inner core is segregated from our outer environment by a well-delineated boundary. The cleavage, embedded so deeply in every reflection, expresses itself in human assertion, in human language as the division of subject and object. Thus one says, I seek wholeness. And while the content of this assertion gives voice to a widely shared aim, its form, its underlying syntax, tacitly affects the fracture of the whole. There is I and there is it. The wholeness, that which in fact is a subverted wholeness, a wholeness undermined by the very act of referring to it in this way. In so positing wholeness, one denies it, since such a positing is an act that implicitly separates what is posited from the I who posits. This is almost poetic of Rosen. He's a very lyrical writer sometimes. But he comes to the core. If everything is a whole and everything should be found with a whole, any attempt to have a meta level is bound to shut out part of reality. That's the problem. We cannot use meta language, we cannot have another description. And we mentioned that so many times we cannot use the word meaning to tell the meaning of every word, because meaning doesn't have a prioritized setting in language. Meaning is not something special. And we cannot even trust meaning to be the same thing. Meaning is actually just this formula: object in space in front of a subject. Now we hope that the word meaning will mean the same in every case. Therefore we can use it like an origo, like a standpoint to see the whole world all at once. And we use this meaning as a precious stone, or like a ring. I like Gollum with his ring and say, my precious. And you keep that to yourself. And if somebody points it out to you, and I remember my first class in quantum physics, where the teacher said, there is no observance somewhere outside your world. And he said, there is no panopticon that sees everything. And people were shocked. They were screaming, because they were so dependent on this helpful character, this all-seeing eye that they could have help of. That's an illusion. They had never, ever in their lives had any help of this eye or this seeing feature, because it doesn't produce anything, nothing. And it doesn't give stability. It doesn't even give boundaries, because these boundaries is constructed here and not in reality. It is in reality that we find everything, both the discrete and the singular, the defined, the exact. And at this very same time, we find the universal, the global, the wholeness at the very same time. And this is the body of paradox. And when he says body of paradox, he's referring to the whole world as a material entity or as a outside in some demeanor. But he's also pointing to the inside, to the body itself, a human body. Both these bodies are bodies of paradox. They are both wholeness and also emptiness in wholeness. Same pronunciation, different meanings, we would say. Actually, in the wholeness, it does not matter whether it's a whole or is everything. It could be complete emptiness as well. And why is that? Because we cannot give a definition even to the whole, because that would take an outside perspective. Can you see the problem here? We cannot be outside of the whole to say it's the whole. It might as well be emptiness. And this is the point that Rosen makes here. With whole and whole. Could be nothing, could be everything. And that is very important. It's sort of his suratur or something like that, where you not exactly say it's one or the other. They are on equal levels. Or no level at all. So this is a gentle way of approaching the wholeness, because every time we try to get close to it, when we try to get it in our grip, we fathom the whole of reality and we have it in our grip, it escapes us because we cannot be outside. But we need to be outside to have knowledge of it. That's also part of the paradox. And it's a little bit, it's not awfully similar, but we were discussing the other day with sitting on the sit bones. We sit on the sit bones and I get the feeling I have them. I have a contact with them now. But if I continue to think this way, I'm going to be overly conscious, overly meticulous with the whole thing. So what I need to do, I start the procedure and then I go on to do something else. And I already posited my body is already the wholeness, and I do something else. I forget about it for a while. And this is the prajna. I think that's an Indian word, I'm not quite certain, but Rosen used that as something that first pinpoints something. It says it's the whole, and then it forgets about it. Then it can be nothing. So you're both inside and outside, and you take turns doing one and the other. And I think that's the method, because think of it. I say we cannot say the whole is the whole, could be nothing. But me saying that is also something outside. Do you see the problem now? And maybe it is not a problem. I think it's not a problem, and I think that's what Rosen says as well. Actually, there is a way. You start with the whole thing, you say what things are, you define them. And this is rather similar to the procedure the Bono says. Define things, analyze things, put them up, very strict, almost like they were external to you, representations. And maybe they are for a while true representations. Because if they were the truest of the truest representation, they must come from the whole. There's no other way a representation can come. And they can be true as a representation as they are. Next step, you break it. And that's also important. First you build it up, you have a clear structure, and then you break it and you have this zero movement. You have this, probably what he means by prajna. You break everything. That's the pun of the joke. That's the asymmetrical thinking in the Bono. And this is also the way to get closer to whatever there is. The boundless. The thing that gives nutrient to everything. The thing that makes it possible for us to have a subject and an object, having that well-defined, established, and then at the same time it can be wholeness. And that's the true paradox. We can have both. It's no exclusion here. So use the wholeness to your advantage. He gives some example, and I think this needs some good storytelling here, because it's sort of tough. This is nothing you should approach directly. But he has 2 stories here, and it's Chinese philosophers with a philosophical tradition called Chan. And in China they used to have a northern school and they used to have a southern school. And in the northern school they had the aim of going beyond the finite world of diversity given to the senses, and to gain awareness of the pristine, seamless totality by an act of self-transcendence. You went over yourself, beyond yourself, and then you can reach the wholeness, the undivided. For example, we attach ourselves to a myriad of things, people and particular ideas. Such fixation on the finite, because I get fixated in the finite. I want these things belongs to me, my relationships, what I own, what I like to do, and so forth. That's a binding in the finite, because it's not the wholeness. And this is also the limited and limiting sense we have of ourselves, because it's a self that owns this, and this gives a sense of lack, because even if I own it, it's not me, it's outside of me. So I have a dependence here. I have the idea this is an object, I crave it, but it's not part of me. There is an inherent lack, an original lack, you could say, original lack. A lack that's not caused by this existing or not. The lack is not in the material world. The lack is because I want something and it's not part of me. So that could give a sense of incompleteness, not being as full as we could. And we try to fill the hole in ourselves with different things, because we are creating a lack by being attached to different things, and we try to find the wholeness. So the wholeness that we seek is not finite. So the attachments that we get to the whole will not be as engraving. So in the northern school they said we must polish the mirror of consciousness and purifying our field of self-awareness. And by doing that, nothing will stick into the mind. Nothing could cloud the reflection in the glass. It's going to be sharp, clear. And when we see into ourselves, where this is taken away from the mind, not in reality but in the mind, we can see into ourselves with impeccable clarity. We can see to the truth of our infinite nature, because we have the infinite nature within us. Nothing is bounded in the wholeness. The wholeness is not only outside of us, it's as well inside of every little molecular, every cell. Like Blake said, in a grain of sand I see the universe. So we begin in a state of illusory boundedness, and we must move forward toward what they call enlightenment and understanding of wholeness by means of a specific technique to polish. But there's a problem there, and that is how they sort of present their, why claiming there is a separation. That is in itself a separation. Because what is whole can never be separated. How could there be separatedness in the whole? It cannot. Even if I somehow feel it's a separatedness, it cannot be real, because every grain of me is part of the whole. So by means of the Northern school saying that this bounded self that owns Fick is a mere illusion, and the boundless infinity is what is really real. This is to explicitly negate the former and affirm the latter. And we who study Derrida knows now there is a marginalization, and probably uncalled for, because we are claiming something is and then we want to get it. And this could be problematic. It's a sort of predication, the word we mentioned the other day in the car. I say that X is something, and I also say that X is not. And this is an act of circumscribing X. I render X finite because I tell what it is. This is what I did here. I tell what things are in context. And I say X is not, and X is. That's a way of circumscribing, telling this is the division, this is what it is. So I am in the act, if I were a part of the Northern school, of effectively creating divisions. The exact same divisions I want to get rid of. So by predicating whatever I predicate, probably the I, like here, I say it's a subject here. That is an object in space. Thereby I am creating it. I started with that. Then I said we should get rid of that. There is a problem here, even though it's very, very, what can you say, fine-grained. But there is another way of approaching this. And that's the southern school of this philosophy called the Chan. In the Chan school, you should not preoccupy you should not preoccupy yourself too much with the technique. Because in that case, you want to attain a goal which separates you from the goal. So the Northern school wants to gradually polish the mirror every day until you get rid of your attachment to the objects. Whatever that object is. It's a material thing, or it's a person, it's a feeling, it's something you want to attain. Thereby you're already separating. So the southern school are the ones who want to practice this specific technique called prajna. A really weird word, prajna. Apparently really weird even to be an Indian word. And this prajna is an alternative. It's almost like the zero movement I spoke about before. So you set everything up and then you have a sort of crash, collapse, point of the joke, the pun. When everything is broken, the structure is well established, needs to be really well established, and then you break it all of a sudden. And it's like a smack in the face. And that smack on the face suddenly changed the perspective, both in subject and object, where you are and the goal you want to attain. What is you and the thing that you want. All of a sudden, everything both is the whole and separated at the same time. So that's a sudden enlightenment, whereas the first one, the northern school, is an zealous, hard-working, gradual development, where this is directly. And this is, of course, must be related to what they say in Japan with a koan. The koan is a paradox that's supposed to be given to you as something to try until you all of a sudden get some sort of realization. Because both subject and object need to be in on it at the same time. Not only the subject, the object as well. And it's almost, can you get a sense for this? It needs, the whole world needs to be shaken. But when I say the whole world, I mean the internal world as well. There's not enough with a massive earthquake or meteorite shattering the earth. It has to be from inside exactly at the same moment. Inside and outside at the same time. And then everything all of a sudden falls in place. The ambigram comes together. It's like you can see the both things of the ambigram at the same time. Something that's impossible otherwise. And that's the moment of prajna. That is the suddenly enlightened. And in a way, that's the only way to go about the thing. But I think in reality, oddly enough, I think it's a combination you should do. You should do both. You should polish that each day. But once you polished enough, you will establish a structure and then you break it. I think that's how to go about it. And Heidegger calls this paradox ontical. And it's when you say, everything I say is false. It's the Cretensian paradox. Coming from Crete, evidently it was stated by Cretensian as well. So he possibly meant the whole thing as a joke, because he wouldn't say bad things about himself, would he now? No, I don't think so. I think it was a joke. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't actually matter if it was a joke. It works anyway. Isn't that interesting? The Cretensian paradox works even if it was considered to be a joke. It still works. And this is what Heidegger, and also Derrida for instance, but now we talk about Heidegger, saying that everything I say is false is ontic. Evidently this assertion is true if it is false, and false if it's true. Applying the general formula for paradox X versus not X to a particular case, the term X stands for the truthfulness of the assertion. And it's both true and false at the same time. And you can actually show this. This happens. This is actually the body of paradox. This is It sounds astonishing, but it is real. So this body of paradox is called ontical. Its key feature is characteristic that its opposing terms, truth and falsity, are particular objects of thoughts, entities already projected before the subjectivity of the thinker. While the well-known liar's paradox certainly subverts the boundary between these objects, it comes too late to directly affect the ontological boundary. The division pre-reflectively established between the object and the existential subject. It is this latter division that constitutes the essence of the predication. So in the essence of the predication, you already have subject and object. So look at this. The predication itself is part of the wholeness. And this is what Heidegger realized. This is why he had these two different conceptions for ontic and ontological. And ontological is the pre-reflective, when it's already in the formula. It's already there. You don't have to predicate anything. It's there from the onset. And this is what gets its resolution in the Klein model. And this is graphed like this. I don't know if, well, I'm going to show it anyway. I'm going to try and show on the real Klein model to make it real. See. Well, obviously, the part that's uncontained, the outside here, that's the subject. The contained, that's the inside, on this way. And this is the space that is containing the inside, the object. And here you have that as a graph, or we talked so many times, object in space in front of subject. Subject is uncontained. It's outside. And do you somewhere in this realize that for something to be contained, some other stuff need to be uncontained? They go hand in hand. So in a way, this is absolutely necessary. And this is, you can turn the table. You could say, this is why this has this shape. So the definition come first and the Klein bottle come second. It could go both ways. But obviously, the subject is not contained. It doesn't have a receptacle. It's not in a box, whereas the object is in a box, and around it is space. It doesn't get clearer than that. Of course, it's clear, but it's something to ponder. So, the reflection, the representation and the represented, the subject and object, these are also coming from the wholeness. There's no outside that could sort of infect the wholeness and taking away the wholeness. Even the subject and the object order and its division is coming from the wholeness. Nothing is outside the wholeness. And I think this is the last bit to close the box now, because now you start to understand that all these things are originating in wholeness. They never ever were anything but parts of the wholeness. And that's the message of the Southern school, the one who says there have to be a direct, instantaneous insight, because otherwise you will continue to separate. Because if you want to achieve a goal of getting greater understanding of the wholeness, you already made a separation. But then you can turn the table and say, actually the Northern school will say that to achieve the goal is also in the wholeness. It's already in the wholeness from the beginning. So that actually does not entail a separation. I think in the end it has to be a combination of the both. As I said, a gradual polishing on the mind. A little bit like sitting more often on the sitting bones. And then you give it a rest. And I think that is the development, the gradual development, not the instant development. And I mean, so many people, and this is actually a true example, so many people come to the Alexander Peak, and because of the surprise, almost like the Southern school, you get slapped over your face and you feel like you are 1,000 kilometers long. You feel that there's nothing in this world I cannot achieve. You feel bigger, younger, better, everything. And that's the Southern school, that's the direct insight. And what you also need, paradoxically, and this is the body of paradox as well, you need to train. Although the realization can come in an instant. Actually, when you go to the teacher, if the teacher is very good, you will get everything that you ever can. Even much more than you want to. More development than you want to. But the thing is, you need to train as well. Isn't that an interesting paradox? But that is often the training method when you come to those places over there. They want to do both. It's like hard work, and that is stopped by massive partying. They really enjoy yourself. I don't have any better way to explain it, but I think that's kind of good. And it reminds me how they live there. They work really, really hard. But when they relax, oh my, do they relax. Good food, good wine, nice conversations. And that's the break. That's when you get the realization and you get a little payment in the back for what you have done. And this is, of course, also the Ouroboros, the snake that is swallowing itself and at the same time turning itself inside out. An age-old symbol. And I think that Ouroboros is the Western way of perceiving that we already know. It's a way of telling how to represent the whole, but still let the whole be a whole. Because in the act of seeing something, I objectify it. Thereby, I sort of shove the whole to the side. But at the same time, it remains the whole. Isn't that fantastic? Well, I begin to like Rosen even more and more. I don't know if the chap is still able to have a conversation. He must be getting on, because his first publications were already in the 60s. I don't know, but maybe nice to contact him. Oh my God, I was sitting down. Bad manners. Thank you very much for tonight, and I wish you all a pleasant evening. Bye bye.